All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, and welcome. I'm always admiring everybody at this time of the day on the day number 2 of the COP with jet lag, so we really appreciate you all being here and bringing us your attention. For this, I think, really interesting, very relevant session, looking at making nature-based solutions viable for the various private and multilateral financing for infrastructure. So we have an excellent panel, super excited to have this panel with us today, and I'm hoping to have a lively discussion about how to accelerate implementation of nature-based solutions, particularly including in hybrid green-grey infrastructure solutions for adaptation and resilience, providing both biodiversity, adaptation and mitigation benefits at the same time. So we're going to start with me giving a short presentation on what are nature-based solutions, and then our friend Steve Goldbach is going to give us some thoughts to stir off the conversation, and then hopefully we will then debate and find the answer to the problem by the end of the hour. You've got to have a goal. So with that, and then lastly, do we have Rohan with us? We don't have Rohan. Okay. So we have one panelist online. So I think I'll introduce our panelists after I've just given the introduction here. So if we want to put the slides up quickly. Where are we? Okay, so Highlight, there we go. So infrastructure is expected to account for up to 80% of the total climate change adaptation spending, amounting to over $450 billion by the year 2050. So that means that we need a $94 trillion investment in global infrastructure by 2040, very large sums of money. And we're starting to see some of that funding come online. The Loss and Damage Fund that has already been announced, a number of other commitments from countries. Next slide, please. However, almost none of that funding has been allocated or is currently going towards nature-based solutions or hybrid solutions or green-grey infrastructure, as we know. These solutions leverage the adaptation and resilience power of natural ecosystems and combine it with traditional infrastructure to provide these hybrid solutions. So here we have one simple example of this, where oyster reefs and wave breaks, more traditional infrastructure approaches, have been combined with mangrove restoration to protect essential bird habitat. If we look at the next slide. Here's another example from the North Brazil Shelf. This is a design which combines mangrove restoration with a seawall to protect the very vulnerable coastline on the Guyana coast of the Caribbean. Again, combining both nature-based solutions with traditional infrastructure to give a full solution for coastal protection. Now, the point today is not to give a lecture on nature-based solutions for infrastructure. It's to really think about how to finance and introduce these solutions into the funding that we have available. Next slide, sorry. We are already starting to think about producing tools and mechanisms for assessing the financial viability of these hybrid nature-based solutions. There's a couple of tools that I'll mention here, but I know there are others. This is a document that was produced really looking at explaining how nature-based solutions can be considered as an infrastructure asset. and how integration of these nature-based solutions into NDCs and other climate commitments can start to shift the investment priority for these types of approaches. Next slide, next slide. We've also started to see the development of the development of cost-benefit analyses type of tools to really understand how these combined nature-based solutions and hybrid solutions can be compared in a very real way to the more traditional pure grey infrastructure or engineering approaches that we've seen. This tool will become available very early next year for general use. And then lastly, next slide, we're starting to see a portfolio of examples of these hybrid approaches being applied around the world. Very dominant, we're seeing a large number of these examples in Europe, North America, Australia, but in some of the most vulnerable parts of the world, these examples are only just emerging. And so this example that we show you here is from the North Brazil Shelf, where the area has been decimated by flooding as a result of mangrove loss. And we're working on designs in several shoreline types and working with the government to develop solutions and engage the local communities to have this full approach that that gets built into their National Coastal Resilience Plan and has therefore associated with it a pipeline of projects that are quite literally the difference between life and death for the large population areas in Guyana and along that coast. So as we develop this portfolio of potential projects for implementation along this coastline, the critical thing for our friends in the government of Guyana is now to finance these approaches and to access all that infrastructure funding that is theoretically available for infrastructure to apply to these hybrid green-grey solutions. Lastly, we're also starting to see some of the more innovative financing approaches begin to evolve. This is an example using insurance, whereby parametric insurance cover is connected to conservation and restoration of mangroves as a coastal protection mechanism. This is being piloted in the Philippines and is being scoped in other parts of Southeast Asia and elsewhere. But again, these approaches are very much in their infancy. And so really not there to access the scale of funding that is necessary for bringing these solutions that provide not just coastal adaptation, they provide carbon and climate mitigation value, biodiversity value, food security value all at once. And accessing the large resources that have been committed for coastal infrastructure is not actually online at this point. So with that, I would like to introduce Steve Goldbach, who is the US Sustainability and Climate Leader from Deloitte, to see if he can stir some thoughts on how we might be able to get new types of funding to these approaches.
Thanks so much, Emily. I'm going to stand and I'm going to try to engage with you guys a bit. We'll have a show of hands here. Truth in advertising to start. I am by no means a nature expert, and I am not a sustainability expert. I took this role about 4 months ago after spending a decade as Deloitte's Chief Strategy Officer and a lifetime as a strategist. So what the heck is a strategist doing here talking about nature-based solutions? Well, there's a few things that I know about from 25 years as a strategist, and those are systems and working with finance departments. Two things that I think are important to this conversation. Anyone remember or know the theory of why the dinosaurs went extinct? Anyone? Hands? Oh, you do? You want it? No, you're good. Okay. So the most commonly accepted theory is the asteroid theory caused change to the climate, and it was a massive change to a fragile ecosystem over a short period of time that caused unlivable life on Earth for dinosaurs. Okay. Similar question, does anyone know how cyanide kills you? I know it's a strange place to start, but analogies tend to work. So cyanide, the human body, our bodies are very fragile ecosystems too inside, right? Whether there's bacteria in our guts, all right, the temperature that we have is a fragile ecosystem. We can't go up above about 104, 105 degrees without death. We can't go below a few degrees. We like it in a very stasis. When you ingest just a small amount of cyanide, literally every mitochondria in every one of your cells ceases to be able to process oxygen, basically suffocating you from the inside out. This is an example of the fragility of ecosystems, right? Right now, we are doing the same thing to the planet and putting the same risk on our very fragile nature ecosystems. And we don't know exactly whether that's cyanide or another asteroid, but I know what I know is that I don't want to take that risk. I don't want to take that risk. And there is massive opportunities in protecting ourselves. There is massive opportunities in protecting ourselves against that potential risk. But humans, unfortunately, were wired for survival. We're very short-term oriented, right? We're very self-centered as a species. And as a result, we find it hard to think in long-term challenges. And in particular, I find this problem with finance departments. Okay? Finance departments spent 25 years getting asked the question, so what will this strategy deliver, Steve? What will this strategy deliver? And the honest answer is that if we're doing something truly innovative, the answer is, I don't know, because it's never been done before. But I can't bring that answer to the finance department. They require me to fill out a spreadsheet to tell them precisely this is what the strategy will deliver. These are the cash flows that it's going to deliver. And then they say, well, how much more are these cash flows versus what I'm generating today? That's the question they require me to ask. And then they look at the difference and they say, well, that's the return on investment. Here's the problem, okay, when you combine those two things. We have this capacity to assume that the status quo is going to go on forever, that our ability to live on this planet, to generate the enormous wealth that we've generated as human beings, right, around the planet, even though there is massive suffering, okay, the amount that we've been able to live off this planet is enormous. And we are assuming that stays constant, right? But that's not, right? That is going to go away if we don't do anything. So the return on investment, if you ask me, is unbelievably massive because we get to continue to live on the planet. That to me feels like a pretty good investment. If we need to put that in cash flows, the cash flows of not being around are pretty much everything goes out of existence. All the shareholder value, everything, okay? Now, if we want to quantify that further, there are trillions and trillions of dollars at risk over the next several years if we do not invest in the kinds of solutions to protect our planet. So if you want to ask what the return on investment is, it's avoiding unmitigated disaster, okay? Now, do we know precisely what nature-based solutions are going to deliver and cost, okay, over a course of 25, 50 years? The answer is, of course, we don't know precisely. We don't know precisely what they're going to deliver, but I certainly want to try. I would love us to stop our focus on 2050 and start focusing more on what we can do over the next several years, over the next short term, to start to learn more, to start to test more, to start to take more action towards this and get out of the conversation around, well, what's the ROI because we're comparing it today, and get more into what are we learning to know that we're doing the right thing. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Emily, and I'll keep that one. All right. Thank you.
All right. Can I turn this one on? Okay. All right. So with that, that's useful stirring. I'm going to introduce our panel. How about this one now? It's working. Okay. Sorry. So sitting next to me here is Simon Young, who's the Senior Director for Climate and Resilience Hub at Willis Towers Watson. We've already met. Robert De Bruin, who's the Director of Corporate Affairs at Van Oord. Rafael de la Croce, who's the Co-Director of the Singapore Green Finance Centre and an Advanced Research Fellow at Imperial College. Giles Sosa is the Blue Natural Capital Manager at IUCN. And then online, we have Lynette Cardoch, who's the Director of Resilience and Adaptation for Moffat and Nickel, and Eric Bill, who's the Chief Economist for AutoCase. Welcome, everybody. So I'd like to take up Steve's challenge here and ask everybody, do we really believe that the portfolio of projects that we're working on diligently at the moment as a sort of set of proof of concepts and to sort of really demonstrate to the world return on investment and that these nature-based solutions and hybrid solutions work. So to really gain traction into the mainstream, both in the engineering community and the finance community, do we really need to do these demonstrations to demonstrate return on investment? And Steve, I think, is suggesting that perhaps we don't need to, that it's obvious. I don't know if others have a thought. I'm going to... shall I pick on somebody? Why don't I pick on somebody online first? Eric, can I pick on you to
Please
sort
do.
of respond to that?
Absolutely. It's great to be here
Sorry,
with
Eric,
everyone
we can't
today.
hear you. Just wait 1 sec.
Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Wonderful. Lovely to be here with everyone. I think, for us in this world, we're...
We still can't hear you, Eric. Hang on.
Economists.
I'm sorry. Lynette,
you
if
can
you
hear me, right?
speak, can we hear you?
Am I coming through loud and clear?
No, we can't hear you. It's obviously this end. So I'll get back to you,
Eric
Eric,
and I
as soon
can
as
hear each other.
we've sorted out the technical issues here.
We can have our own chat.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, yes, it's working. And in the meantime, they can, let's say, solve the technical problems. Thanks, Steve. Challenging introduction. My name is Robert Bruin. I'm, let's say, approaching your story from the practical side. I'm here representing a family company, which is, let's say, active in marine construction, coastal protection, nature restoration, and, let's say, leading partner in offshore wind. There was a minute I thought you are a biologist when you were, let's say, explaining your stories, but in the end it's indeed coming to, let's say, to the final stage about business cases and the return on investments. I don't agree totally with you. I think when it's about, let's say, applying nature-based solutions, and we do have some practical experience, I think we are ready with our toolkits. I think we did a lot of demonstrations, we did a lot of pilots in respect to coastal protection with mangrove, with coral, with seagrass, also with hybrid situations. Sometimes you need, let's say, the hard structure and the grey infrastructure. I think what is missing, maybe 2 or 3 elements. I think it's time, let's say, to talk about economic of scale. So that means we have to stop on a project level, let's say, to assess a project, whether it's, let's say, feasible, let's say, from the business case. That really needs a more systematical approach, and I think we have to change the systems within the finance sector. When it's about blended finance, I just had a meeting this morning with some funds, and they're also quite eager to step in, let's say, another approach. And the second one, and I think you were referring to that, I think we do have a lot of experience also in true valuing. And what I was missing in your pitch, I think it's not about de-risking and, let's say, the cost. I think it's better to, let's say, to apply the valuing aspects. And we do have a lot of experience. For example, we did a project in the western part of Africa, Senegal, together with World Bank, and we were able, let's say, to monitorize also the soft elements about socio-economic aspects, about tourism, about nature side. And maybe last but not least, I think we can learn from that when it's about coastal protection side, and let's say also working on the oceans. For example, in the offshore wind industry, we are now, let's say, applying also in big concessions and big tenders, non-price criteria. Well, and that makes also for the practical side, when you're a contractor or a developer, much easier to come up with other business cases.
All right. How about we go Raphael, and then we'll go see if we can try online one more time.
Sure, thank you. So today I'm representing Imperial, of course, where I work, but also the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure. I belong to the Task Force on Finance. Tomorrow they're going to publish a position paper, and very much the key takeaways are also part of my what I'm going to say today. You started with the preparation of the projects and the way that the design of the project needs to be built, which is very much where we need to start it. I take another approach. I look at it from an investor point of view. The drivers, to your point about the return on investment, is that enough? Well, first of all, with a private sector mindset, of course, here, and the financial investors, the type of investors raising now 30 billion, the Brookfield fund just raised for infrastructure. Well, those type of funds, the drivers behind are three. The first one is some of the investors behind those funds, for example, the Norwegian Sovereign Fund, is addressing risks. Is looking at the physical risk across the portfolio, is looking at the reason issue, and is then looking into the adaptation and infrastructure solutions to that kind of risk. There is an alignment to ESG, net zero commitment, nature commitment that investors are doing. In that sense, capital is flowing also to resilient infrastructure. And then, of course, there is the risk-adjusted returns that you would expect from an investor perspective. And that would change depending on what type of investor are you. Are you a long-term investor, ready to take any liquidity risk, ready to take a long-term view of 30 years or more that these kind of assets would need? Well, this is the approach. I think this is the kind of investor we need to get into the discussion. But in order to get into the discussion, you need to build the investment case. And that starts with the project preparation, starts with understanding what are the benefits and co-benefits on nature-based solution attached to infrastructure, and how to monetize them if that is possible. And then it's about the financing, which is a twofold problem. It's about the access to finance, very much the case for developing countries, which cannot, and the blended finance discussion, the multilateral role and all that. But it's the revenue streams before the financing per se. Who is ultimately going to pay for this infrastructure? Is the user fees, is the water system, water company system in the UK based on user fees that is repaying the investor investment, is the carbon credits. And that, I think, is a bit where we are at the moment, or we need to take into consideration.
So one of the things I'm hearing, which resonates with something I heard the other day, was the difference between risk and uncertainty, and that just because something's uncertain doesn't mean it's risky. And I think that one of the points Steve was making is that I think that a lot of these solutions, we don't know whether they're going to work. It's uncertain. And so assessing the risk, our tendency is to put sort of high levels of risk on things that are uncertain, even if they're not risky. And I think that's one of the things we're struggling with. Can we get Eric?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello, hello? Lynette, you can hear me, right?
We still can't hear Eric.
I can definitely hear you, Eric.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think they hear either of us, though.
Okay, apologies from the technical support team. I'm sorry, guys. Simon?
So, Steve, I think you're right in terms of the short-termism of the human race. Unfortunately, that's built into our economic system. And I think realistically, we're not going to change that on the time frame that we need to take the approach that you're taking, or that you laid out as the counter argument, I guess. So I think some path in between where we are testing out ideas and that they make sense from a current rational economic perspective, and there is, as we've just heard, various ways to dilute the ROI that one requires on various projects. I think that will only increase as we move forward, but that we don't. I think perhaps we don't try to stop expansion of pilots, for example, just because they're not getting the ROI that might be expected. So I think pilots are important, but also scaling up from pilots, because you learn something from pilots, but you really need to get to scale to start. So important to learn. And I think on the risk side, and I agree, Emily, with what you said, and I think by doing projects and being from the insurance side, we're all about assessing what's risk and what's uncertainty, and constraining that uncertainty is really, really important. And then only by doing that do you identify whether it's real risk or whether it's actually just risk masked by uncertainty. And so we've learned, we've been involved in Risco pretty much throughout its existence, and I think we've all learned a lot from that. Some of those lessons have been around how you do this kind of stuff generally, but some of it has also been around how you do address this ROI question, and I think that has probably led to a slower progress with that project than might otherwise have been the case, because you're always looking for, okay, how's this going to be sustainable on a reasonable ROI? So the pivot to looking for the monetizing the value, the ecosystem service value through carbon sequestration, in this case through coastal protection, etc. Perhaps that's, I think, has constrained the ability of the project to learn the really big lessons that would be learned by expanding more quickly and bringing it to scale. So I do think we're kind of caught a little bit between this kind of big vision of, we've got to be doing this stuff at scale as quickly as possible, and the economic reality that those funding flows just aren't there to do that without that ROI side of it. So and just from the insurance perspective, we are trying to bring tools in that can help to kind of, I guess, de-risk those investments and make sure that the ROI is you're aiming for is more obtainable and more reliably obtained, and so therefore kind of hopefully mainstream some of these projects. But I do think that there is a real danger that we are just going to move too slowly if we're always looking for the ROI that we think is expected.
Steve, do you want one last word before I move us to another conversation?
Well, I'm glad that the remarks offered some provocation. I'm not sure that there's as much disagreement as it might seem. So let me clarify a couple things. Number one is, I agree we need to show an ROI. But when you talk about forecasting cash flows, we're forecasting it against a baseline. And all I'm saying is that baseline is not the status quo with no change. That baseline is a dwindling amount of cash flows in our current that makes it attractive. Now, if you look at a specific investment on an investment in infrastructure for an investor who is coming in without any associated cash flows, to your point, Simon, we need to create the system that simulates the ability for them to earn a revenue commensurate with the return to overall society. For me, that means that we need to put in place the systems of finance that make that return on investment commensurate with the returns that it generates for overall society. Those systems, I do not believe, are in place today, but they are starting to get in place by different governments around the world. So if you're a local government, if you're a city government, you need to be able to incentivize the kind of investments to save your city. So we're looking at things like this in Miami and things like this in other coastal cities, because the returns are, again, unmeasurable. Does the city exist or doesn't it exist? And how much would you spend to protect it? So I don't disagree that the investment needs to be there. I'm simply saying the returns are there. It's just a question of from whose perspective and how we choose to measure them. And we need to create the system that aligns the actual return, which is, again, infinite, with the returns on a specific project. And I think it's unacceptable for us to just accept, well, we're not going to be willing to change. Well, then we're not going to have cities on coasts for very long.
I agree on that side, or Steve, but maybe to let's say, to put it a little bit blunt, I think on that side, the financial ecosystems are failing. So when you look, let's say, to the big infrastructures, whether it's about sea defense, whether it's about, let's say, construction of dikes, for example, we can't, let's say, align with assurance companies to step in upfront. Well, and when you look at the payout, for example, when there are floodings, etc., so we have to combine definitely those elements, and I think on that side it's needed, let's say, to restruct a little bit more the financial systems.
Okay, I've been told that if we just are quiet for half a minute, they can re-establish connection with our online colleagues. Do you want me? Yeah, we're on. Okay. So while we're loading everybody up, I'm going to move us to the next one, and I'm going to pick on Jael to go first, especially with your experience with the Blue Natural Capital facility. If we think about these nature-based solutions, these hybrid solutions, do we have everything we need except for the financing to go to scale?
Hi. First, thank you for the invitation. It's a good question. So just quickly, I'm an engineer working for IUCN, and I developed basically the plastic program for the last 10 years. And previously, I did 20 years in problem solving. And since February, I've been managing 2 financing facilities at IUCN. So the main goal is to pick through call for proposals. Needed to create trust for investors. And the idea that you need to show the cost of inaction versus the benefits of investment, it's part of it. But more than that, and this also relates with the first question, is creating trust means that you should not create a sense that you're going to deliver so much, over-delivering, and attend for transparency. Most of the work that we've been seeing in terms of proposals that come to our facilities, they over-deliver, but it's probably, you look at the KPIs, according to the timeline, you say, this is not possible. This is not even possible. But still, we identify a big need for investment at this very early stage. But mostly, it's still a question, again, trying to reply to the first one, of creating trust for the investors. Because the idea is, of course, after 1, 2, 3 years that we support these small projects, how many of them actually became bankable, and why did they become bankable? This is one of our first concerns. But can you please rephrase your question again?
Is money enough to get to scale?
No. No, you need to show the benefits of NbS, the benefits for ecosystem and service. If not, you're not there. Money is not enough, of course. It's the whole concept. So it's the holistic approach, like in so many other areas. And I've been seeing this because where I come from, dealing with the plastic waste issue, was the same thing. Is money enough? If we just buy or put money into building infrastructure that deal with waste, is it enough? No, it's not enough. It's in that case it's consumption patterns and production and consumption and a lot of things. So in the case of NbS, there's again the services that you expect to be delivered with these solutions are the most important. It's not just throwing money that's going to solve anything. I'm not sure that I'm being clear and answering this question.
Well, I'm going to move to Lynette. Can we hear you?
Am I coming in okay?
We still haven't got any audio online. I'm so
heard you,
sorry, Lynette and Eric. All right. Others, what are we fundamentally missing that prevents financing from being the only thing in the way of scale?
Yeah, maybe in length of, let's say, the previous speaker. I think in the end, let's say globally, there's money enough. But I think it's more a matter of whether the money is accessible. So when you look also in all the negotiations which are, let's say, having now here during the COP, it's really about big money. But when you talk about projects, when you talk about business cases, not that easy to make them accessible. So I think that's also a challenge to make that money, let's say, applicable for other projects with more core and, let's say, in respect to the native-based solution side. I think we can do much better.
I'm going to just express from my point of view, there are lots and lots of challenges, but resources is a significant one. And if we had a project in the Philippines where an aid agency that will go unnamed gave us $5 million to use nature-based solutions to protect 10 villages in some of the most isolated parts of the Philippines, which just if you put the numbers, if you think about how much money would go into protection of communities if we were using traditional infrastructure, we're talking orders of magnitude of different resources available. So yes, there was sort of capacity issues. Yes, there were technical issues to overcome, but I think that the resources available for these nature-based solutions were being sort of are unreasonably small compared to people wouldn't even flinch at resourcing traditional infrastructure projects at significantly higher levels.
Well, I think one of the things, did you get them back? No. I think one of the things that maybe we need is great stories of success. I mean, that could be one of the roles of the prototypes in early stages, is to show and demonstrate to the world the mitigation that nature-based solutions can create, in addition to showing that they can be financially viable, that they actually work, that they work in mitigating the disasters that they're intending to create. And so I think part of the value of focusing on let's get some signature projects completed so that we can show the world that these should be part of the toolkit is another mechanism to demonstrating. So you need, in any change program, you need demonstration projects to show that they work, and that can be an important role of that as we go forward.
So I have the team telling me that we can actually hear Lynette and Eric. Lynette, do you want to try?
Am I coming through okay now? I don't hear the room.
I mean, yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Lynette, we can hear you, but it has to be a sort of, it's like talking to somebody on a submarine. It's only one way. So Lynette, I don't know if you have any responses to the conversation per se. Is financing enough, or what are we missing here?
Gosh, there are a lot of different layers, and one of them, aside from the financing, is just a lot of the regulatory structure that doesn't allow us to really scale up some of these amazing projects that have been proven. We talk about, one of the things I do want to say is when we talk about this issue of uncertainty as a scientist, it doesn't mean we don't know anything, right? And so when we've got the policymakers and regulators a little bit uncomfortable with uncertainty, there are a lot of ways that we can add more information and really use probabilistic analyses and the same way we do in everything else to add a little bit more information. But that being said, being able to really scale up, there's some concerns with the regulatory side that's just not ready for some of these things. And also, one of the things that we run into as an implementer of these solutions is really, quite frankly, the implementers. The amount of folks that understand how to do this and do this well are growing. And this is one of the areas that we're continuing to push, is for the workforce development to have scientists, engineers, the whole scheme of folks that understand how to put these projects into the ground and do them correctly. So I'll stop there and see how the audio is going.
So Eric, as the economist on the panel, I'll sort of go back to our beginning premise, which is that we need to demonstrate return on investment, and for this to actually go anywhere. Where do you stand on that particular statement?
I certainly agree. I mean, it's a fundamental outcome from infrastructure is the goal to create multi-benefits around projects. If we're not in a position to measure those on a, again, risk-adjusted and uncertainty basis, there's major issues in how these projects get designed, developed, implemented, and funded as well. And so as an economist working with mostly technical specialists, so experts like Lynette, working with engineers and scientists and architects on major complex multidimensional infrastructure projects, we're often playing that specialized role in quantifying and enumerating these multi-benefits that come from multi-decade long projects into the future with dynamic attributes such as climate change impacting those sets of multi-benefits. And the exciting news is, as Lynette mentioned, capacity is being built in this space. So deeper understanding from an engineering perspective, I think that's where pilots serve a very important purpose. We've worked on nature-based solution projects for myself for the last 15 years, supporting engineers and project sponsors. And one key part of the challenge that we see is the evidence, that empirical basis to make design decisions from an engineering standpoint. You really, I would find that group to be one of the most risk-averse group of experts out there for a reason. And if we don't have that engineering evidence to support deeper integration with nature-based solutions, then we have a challenge from the get-go. I also do want to add around regulatory context, I would add the procurement considerations. I think it's incredibly important where most projects get procured are at a local government basis. They're funded from different sources, of course, but to have projects that have nature-based solutions embedded in a series of co-benefits that are also key criteria and KPIs for project development would be wonderful. And with that, lastly comes the emergence in the capital markets of the pricing and evaluation of environmental attributes. And so we're seeing emerging markets. I'm working on several projects right now where the ability to sell renewable energy credits or renewable identification numbers in certain markets within the US are providing, they have multiple levels of financial support to make these projects fundable and bankable, and love to see that in many more emerging markets around the world.
All right, so Eric just told us that the engineers are some of the most conservative people in the world. And Steve told me that the finance world is incredibly conservative in actually trying to do things differently. Is there actually any hope here for nature-based solutions to go to scale?
To give some optimism, I think, the signal needs to start from a policy side. Clearly, it's about having the targets. Here we are COP. Hopefully something good will come also for the negotiations going forward. Good messages were coming out on the adaptation side. So that is the policy signal. The pipeline of projects will come from the policy objectives and the targets that we have for 2030, 2050. And based on that, we will know the kind of economy that we're building and the type of projects that will come to the market. That's the first point. In this vision, clearly, you need to have a systemic approach. is not just about finance, it's the governance challenge. We know how difficult it is to put projects up and running. The number of stakeholders. What I think the good messages that we're doing a study at Imperial on a few case studies on practical case studies on nature, climate, and infrastructure. Where do you see them coming together? There are examples. Positive examples, for example, in the real estate sector, where you do have this a city level. You have a property appreciation coming from building with green, incorporating the biodiversity impact, the climate adaptation, which could be the heat island effect, could be the flooding risk. Incorporating that in your design, translating that into certification that would actually state that you're doing so, as a direct reflection in the pricing, and also allow you to issue sustainable bonds, for example, sustainable instruments. So, and that is already happening. Canary Wharf, the largest regeneration project in Europe, done in London, owned by the Qatari Investment Authority, and Brookfield, is very much an example of best practices in this sense.
I'm going to go online again since we can actually talk to them now. Eric, is there any sign of hope?
Absolutely. Economists are optimists at heart, even though pessimists more vocally. And our project work really does focus on the ability to look at these emerging projects that are innovative, some combination of hybrid, green-gray infrastructure. Work with Conservation International is doing just that right now, looking at building complex, risk-adjusted, Lynette used the word probabilistic evaluations to support the evaluation of these coastal hybrid green-gray systems. And the goal, of course, is to take discrete projects, build evidence within them, and use that to advocate, garner support, garner funding, garner engineering capabilities around this whole consideration of more nature-based solutions to bring it to scale. And we're working and have worked on a few emerging considerations and how to structure these, let's say, smaller, more regionalized projects into larger pools where these smaller projects, perhaps not as interesting to institutional capital, could grow, be part of a pool, go through the process that potentially we just heard of from Raphael, where you can certify, sort of confirm and guarantee a set of characteristics around the project that are sustainable, resilient, create biodiversity and public benefits. And then you could have the size that would be appealing to institutional capital to really drive these projects globally.
Lynette?
Yeah,
What's
this is
your
my
spark
jam.
of
I
hope that money
absolutely
might
love
actually come
this
to these
because
projects?
I am hugely optimistic in this arena, not because we're already doing this. So the magic needs to happen on this scaling up, and we're already seeing environmental impact bonds going towards hybrid infrastructure, particularly in water quality. We have a great example from a city in the community in Virginia, where they were doing it for some tidal flooding, but also looking at some water quality, and very, very already easy to put some technical parameters, get the engineers comfortable, and of course the financing community that put that bond out a couple years ago. So there's already action in that arena. Where there's a little bit more of the question mark is how much we're going to be able to scale up when it comes to coastal flooding and coastal storm surge risk reduction. And I'm hugely bullish in that arena because we have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers with their engineering research that is going to be fit for purpose. We've got U.S. institutions with the Engineering with Nature Network. Again, high caliber researchers from around the world really looking at how do we look at fit for purpose solutions that are going to allow for quantifiable risk reduction and building on that social and environmental aspects that we're all trying to figure out. How do we quantify? How do we monetize? But we know that there's a there. So to me, this isn't an aspect of if it's going to be able to be scaled up and financed, but when and how we're over.
So with that, I wanted to give everybody a chance to have one last thought on the secret to scaling these ecosystems, so we can leave the hour with the answer.
So I just wanted to mention, I think this COP is obviously important, but I think the biodiversity COP is also important in this space. I think that there was great progress made at the end of last year, and I think that is a very optimistic sign that there are strong signals coming from a nature positive side more broadly, and that can get locked into the regulatory system, etc. And those sorts of pressures, I think, come together to make it much more likely that we can get more scale around these things. From an insurance perspective, we have seen really good progress in understanding what the benefits are of, for instance, greening cities to reduce the urban heat effect. There's really good science and probabilistic science around that now, which gives us the tools to start to actually demonstrate that such investments are valuable. The value is quite dispersed, and quite a lot of it's on the public side. And so, as you said, I think earlier on, you need to be able to capture those benefits and somehow get those into the ROI as well, for sure. But I do think we're making a lot of progress, and I'm optimistic that we can more and more bring nature into the picture in a reasonable way that meets both societal needs and, to the extent that we have to, short-term economic needs.
The only thing I'll end with is when you hear folks saying there's a there, and then on the other hand you hear them say, but our systems don't show it. What we need is a change in our systems in order to demonstrate it. So the challenge is, this goes back to 15 years ago. There was a debate in the world of marketing. And the debate was, is there a return on investment in digital advertising? Right? And today, that's a patently stupid question, because clearly there is. At the time, right, everybody's models were saying, well, I don't see the return on digital advertising, but at the same time, you saw everyone stopping watching television and starting spending more time online. We're at the same stage now here, where we know, as you well put it, we know there is a there. We know there is a societal benefit. But the systems that we have in place to distribute the risk and distribute the financing solutions are not valued in a way that gets it there. We have to therefore change the set of systems in order to make sure that the actual societal returns are reflected in the risk-adjusted returns that we're doing. And so I think part of that is pilots, part of that is demonstration. Part of that is changing incentives and credits to give people the incentives to do the pilots, to get the financing in place, to demonstrate the value. And that's how I think we'll get there. But I am optimistic that we'll be able to do that. I think these early stage, near-term actions in order to do that are the mechanism to demonstrating the return that we can do that. That will get the requisite actors making the changes we need to do.
Yeah, well said, Steve. Just a few words to add. I think from the private side, we are optimistic, and I agree we have to change some systems on that. The question is, can we do that? Yes, we can do that. And on the other hand, it's good that engineers and financial guys are, let's say, conservative, because they have to do it sound and solid. But maybe another example in our sector as marine contractor, also, let's say, we are sailing big vessels, and we are now heavily investing also in e-fuels, methanol, etc. Well, what will be helpful when the financial institutions is also KPI driven on that element. We are using the science-based targets on that side, and we can do, let's say, the same also on the climate adaptation. We can make big steps, and we can accelerate it definitely.
I can agree more about the system change and the need to get into the natural capital accounting sort of discussion, how to quantify these co-benefits that we all know that are valuable to everyone, but then not in the current financial system. and that I think there is a big role for academia, but not academia sitting somewhere doing this work, very much collaborating with other communities, in particular the engineering one, given the technical issues that we know. And so this work, this debate, where there is this cross discussion, the work done on sustainable infrastructure, this I think a very valuable work and very valuable collaboration, which will lead to solutions in the short term.
Very shortly to share my negative image as an engineer of this. Well, it's not negative, but I would not finish like that. But as normally said, prototypes never scale, never fail, type of, right? Here, the obstacle in terms of NbS is not so much finance, but probably extent available to implement those NbS. To find an entire coastline made of mangroves, for instance, or I would talk about wastewater treatment a project that we're running in small islands in Pacific, but it's not applicable here. So mostly, I believe it's extent available and sometimes conflict of usage, where in the same area you have conflict of services, and then you need to work with everyone to actually make it work. That's it.
Lynette, final words?
This is an area that's going to continue to grow for us, just from the technical side, from the finance side, and ultimately, when we start to continue to see the benefit that's coming to our coastal communities, that's where the tipping point will come in terms of the broader support, not just in the finance industry, but in our communities around the world with the policymakers. Folks like success stories, and we're starting to really replicate them around the world. Over.
Eric?
Yeah, I would echo many of the panelists' thoughts here. Broader coordination, collaboration, deeper technical data and best practices to be able to leverage this work and build upon it. I'm really excited for these emerging considerations that are starting to get tested out through pilots that then can move to acceleration and implementation at scale. Other considerations around financing mechanisms that are highly innovative ways to build a capital stack. I'm interested in what we're seeing out of folks like the New York Stock Exchange and the development of these natural asset companies that really driven to protect and build healthy ecosystems and provide opportunities for investors to invest directly to help monitor, measure, and invest in nature. So I'm excited for these emerging investment vehicles and the collaboration of all these technical experts around enhanced capacity in the space. Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, I'm wondering, is Rohan on there? Rohan has been joining us, and you've been drawing for us. Is that right? Can I give you 2 minutes to show us what you've drawn?
That is correct, and thank you. I just have a warning. I draw about environmental issues, so you might find my cartoons a little biased towards nature-based solutions. And yeah, with that, I end my disclaimer and begin my slideshow. Here we go. I hope everyone's able to read it in the room. If not, I'll read out the cartoon to you. Please let me know.
Brilliant.
All right. Second. And I'd like you to read the banner as well. Blue-green infrastructure for your climate blues. Structure for your climate blues. And we've heard a lot about scaling up. I mean, even engineers need to breathe. And the final draft. All right, that's it from me. If you can let me know which two of these you prefer the best, I'll be furnishing them and handing them over to the GRP and to you all. Thanks.
I think there's universal admiration for the last one, and then we can discuss which other one wins.
The first one, if you need to do your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, that first one is actually pretty wonderful. The Australian in me particularly likes it. So with that, I want to thank our panel, and I really want to particularly thank our panel online for their patience with our technical issues. We apologise for that, but it's great that you were finally able to join us. I'd like to thank everybody who came and joined us this afternoon. I know you have a lot of choices here at the COP, and we're very grateful that you came and joined us. I'd like to thank the Resilience Hub and all the sponsors for having us. We're very grateful for that hosting. And with that, I hope you have many more very useful conversations and we can solve this funding and financing solution by the end of the week. So thank you.